Hello everyone. The topic I am going to discuss is the midbrain. So midbrain or mesencephalon. It is considered as the shortest segment of the brain. So I shall be discussing this topic under two headings. The section of the midbrain at the level of inferior colliculus and the section of midbrain at the level of superior colliculus. So firstly, coming to the section of the midbrain taken at the level of inferior colliculus. So in this diagram, this is the most anterior aspect of the midbrain. So this anterior segment is considered as the crus cerebri. So this is the most ventral part or the anterior part of the midbrain, which is called as crus cerebri. The components of the crus cerebri is unequally divided as the major portion in the middle is representing the corticospinal fibers. So 2/3 of this crus cerebri is containing the corticospinal fibers. The remaining 1/3 is divided into medial 1/6 and lateral 1/6. Medial 1/6 is containing the frontopontine fibers and lateral 1/6 is containing the temporopontine fibers. So medial 1/6 frontopontine fibers, intermediate 2/3 is corticospinal fibers and lateral 1/6 is temporopontine fibers. And most posteriorly, so this is the area of the colliculus. So as this is the section which is appreciated at the level of inferior colliculus, so this is inferior colliculus. Colliculi is plural. And whatever remaining portion of the midbrain is there, so this together is called as tegmentum. So in this tegmentum, in the center, there is what is known as the periaqueductal gray matter, because the cavity of the midbrain is called as the cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius, and whatever gray matter which will be present surrounding this particular cerebral aqueduct together is considered as periaqueductal gray matter. And the nuclei which are appreciated here on the lateral wall, it is the mesencephalic nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, and the ventral wall contains the nuclei of the trochlear nerve, which is the fourth cranial nerve. So the peculiarity of this fourth cranial nerve, so this is the one which undergoes decussation, and this is the only cranial nerve to emerge out from the dorsal surface of the brain. Then the junction between the tegmentum and the crus cerebri shows a well-defined sheet of pigmented tissue, and this is what is called as substantia nigra. So substantia nigra is present in the entire length of the midbrain. The connections of this substantia nigra with corpus striatum, with the thalamus, so all these things will help in bringing about the coordinated volitional movements. So that is substantia nigra. And the remaining components of this tegmentum from medial to lateral side will appreciate the various components of the lemniscal pathway. So most medially it is medial lemniscus, then comes trigeminal lemniscus, then spinal lemniscus and the lateral lemniscus. So from medial to lateral side, medial lemniscus, trigeminal lemniscus, spinal lemniscus and lateral lemniscus. So medial lemniscus is nothing but the continuation of fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. The trigeminal lemniscus is nothing but the sensory afferent fibers which are coming from the trigeminal area of the face. Spinal lemniscus is nothing but the continuation of the lateral spinothalamic tract, and lateral lemniscus is the dorsal and the intermediate acoustic striae which are concerned with the auditory pathway. So these are the various components of the lemniscal pathway. Then the remaining segment, we can appreciate the bundle of central tegmental tract. The inferior colliculus will be connected to the medial geniculate bodies through what is known as inferior brachium. And from the medial geniculate body through these thalamic radiations. So these are the thalamic radiations. So as it is the lateral lemniscus, the auditory pathway, which is appreciated in this section. So majority of these fibers of this auditory pathway will reach through this pathway to the auditory area, which is area number 41 and 42, which is present in the temporal lobe in the transverse temporal gyrus of Herschel. So this is the diagram for the section of the midbrain at the level of inferior colliculus. And the rest of the field, there are components of medial longitudinal fasciculus, the tectospinal tract, and the rubrospinal tract. So mainly the key points appreciated in the section of midbrain at the level of inferior colliculus will be the trochlear nerve nucleus, and the peculiarity of this nerve, it is the only cranial nerve to emerge out from the dorsal surface, and it is going to undergo decussation, and all these lemniscal pathway and the lateral lemniscus, which is concerned with the auditory pathway and which is reaching the auditory area number 41 and 42.
This is the specimen of the brainstem. The upper part is the midbrain. So that is the crus cerebri of the midbrain. The pons, and pons getting connected to the cerebellum through the middle cerebellar peduncle. The few fibers of the trigeminal nerve which is attached to the pons. The horizontal sulcus or the pontomedullary junction. The 6th, 7th and the 8th cranial nerves are attached at the level of horizontal sulcus. The rest of it is the medulla oblongata. The anterior median fissure in the median plane. From medial to lateral, the pyramid, olive and the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Between the pyramid and the olive, the emergence of the rootlets of hypoglossal nerve. Between the olive and the inferior cerebellar peduncle, the rootlets of 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerves. This is the posterior view. The upper part is the midbrain. The two colliculi, superior colliculus and the inferior colliculus, separated by the cruciform suture. All the four colliculi together is also called as corpora quadrigeminum or tectum. This is the superior surface of the section of the midbrain at the level of superior colliculus. The most ventral part is the crus cerebri, plural it is crura cerebri. The pigmented sheet substantia nigra, which is intervening between the crus and the tegmentum. The cavity of the midbrain, the cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius, and the superior colliculus on the posterior side. The rest of it is tegmentum.